Hey guys, vanitas.cabal here. I'm going to go over my decks that I use for the GwentSlam qualifier number 2, and then go over my 5-game series against number 22 at the time on Pro Ladder overall, Colmoan. First I'm going to go over my decks, why I chose them, where I got them from, and my overall strategy. So my strategy was to go with 3 decks that are all at least even or good against Dagon and Bran, because we were almost certainly going to see Dagon and Bran in almost every matchup. Because Dagon, Bran, and Emehir Spies are the most popular and some of the best decks, especially Spies and Bran, we can't, and there's no decks that are good against all of them. I decided to punt the matchup against Emehir Spies and try to win the other 2 games of the series against any other faction with these 3 decks. So first, we're going to take a look at my Siege and Scorch deck. This is the exact same list that I published on GwentDB a while ago, and yeah, it hasn't changed at all. I've tried a few variations, including artifact compression instead of Scorch and some other things, but yeah, this bread and butter deck just works. Yeah, that's about it. I know Insangfa, who is another great tournament player as well as deck builder, likes to run the John Nautilus version of this deck, but I found this version to be more consistent. It absolutely wrecks Dagon. I almost never lose unless I have, just the worst draw possible, and it's about even against Bran, maybe a little worse, but it holds its own against every other deck, and does very well against Spell Scoia'tael, because, well, Spell Scoia'tael can deal with 1 Scorch effect if they manage to save their Alzur's double cross until the last round. They can almost never deal with 2. But this deck is very bad against Spies, especially if the opponent knows what's coming. And the reason for that is pretty simple. Against Emehir Spies, Emehir can steal your taller, and that means that with Cantarella and being able to play your taller, basically no matter what, you're going to go into the last round going first, or down a card, which means that you're going to have your opponent, your Spy's opponent, is going to have the last play of the game. And what that means is, if you've set up for your last play, so Emehir Spy's last play of the game, ideally, is Rain Farm that draws Roach into Joachim that pulls the last card of the deck, which is a Resurrected Nausicaa Brigade from Cantarella, which is worth 9 points. So that's 9 points plus the 10-point boost from Joachim. It kills Joachim, so you don't get any points. It gets another 5-point boost, so a 24-point, a 24-point Nausicaa Brigade plus Rain Farm that's 5 and Roach that's 4 for a 33-point play. And to kill those 24 points, you want to have Scorch. But if you're going last, you have one way to get Scorch, even if you're not, if you don't have last play, and that is Bork, Villain Trent Mirth. However, Spies have the easiest way to kill Villain Trent Mirth. Because almost no decks run locks, and they shouldn't, Villain Trent Mirth is very effective against most decks, but against Spies, they can use Infiltrator to turn it into a Spy, and use Menno to kill it. The one way to potentially counter this is to run Summoning Circle instead of Taller. But that gives you a more inconsistent matchup against every other matchup, and which might actually be a better choice for ladder, but because we're expecting to lose against Emehir Spies with most of our decks, it's totally okay to use Taller, get the more consistency, and just win in the other matchups. If you want to see an in-depth explanation of this guide and all the cards, I just checked the card. It's my most popular video right now on the channel, and yeah, that's a good one. Next, we're going to take a look at Bran. This is a deck list that I took completely from Raikou. You should be familiar with the Bran decks by now, but the idea with this deck is not running Grimmist, not running not running Herbalist, and only running one Lacerate, and instead running 2 Armor Smiths, 3 Freyas, and Udalric. 3 Freyas and 3 Warmongers. I know some lists cut one of either of those. And the reason for playing this list is pretty simple. It's at least as strong, I believe, although a little bit harder to play than the standard list. And if you're playing in a tournament, your opponent is definitely going to know all the standard lists, and if you can surprise them with an Udalric to get last play when they don't think you can, then you have a big advantage. It gives you one last chance to Coral or Eskel something on their side. It gives you one last chance to restore. Alright, so for the last deck that I chose to bring to the tournament, I went with a Scoia'tael deck. I wanted to find a deck that would work well against both Bran and Dagon, and this is the deck that I found. It's based off Taknado's deck that someone on GwentDB submitted. I'm not sure where they got the list originally, but let's go through it. So the core of the deck is the Dwarven cards. The Dwarven Agitator that can pull the Skirmishers or the Pyrotechnicians from the deck. The original deck had 2 Skirmishers and no Rehabbers Sappers. I decided to cut one for Rehabbers Sappers. We'll get into that in a moment. If I was to play the tournament again, I might cut the Hawker Smuggler for a second Rehabbers Sappers, but anyway, so getting back to the Dwarves. If you can be lucky enough to get 2 Skirmishers in hand, you can guarantee that every Agitator will pull a Mahakam Pyrotechnician. And the Pyrotechnicians are really the core of the deck. So you might notice that we have the Zoltan Hailstorm Lacerate kit, which is great for bringing all cards to one row, stacking them, and then punishing them. And normally you see this kit in decks that play double Gold Weather. But the reason it works in this deck is that, just like double Gold Weather, Mahakam Pyrotechnicians punish decks that play on all 3 rows. Because it hits... if you haven't seen this card before, it damages a unit on each row on the other side by 3 at random. So we have the effect that gives us the same effect as Weather, which is punishing spreading out units among rows. And we have the cards that punish stacking rows. So that's our main job. And then our other cards are just in service of that end. The reason why this works so well is that you get 2 points from the Agitator, 5 from the Pyrotechnician, and then up to 9 on the other side, which in an ideal case means that this is a 16-point play that also damages units on the other side of the board. Let's go over the other cards really quickly. The Hawker Smuggler, which I said that I would think about replacing, is useful for drawing locks and removal, but not much else. It can be a good card against Dagon Swarm, because every time they play a Swarm card, it grows by, 1+ points. But I don't think it's absolutely worth it. The Pyrotechnicians do a fine job of clearing Swarm, as does Lacerate. The Elven Mercenary combos with First Light and Lacerate, so that even though this is not an ultra thinning deck, you can play Lacerate from 2 cards, either the card by itself or from the Elven Mercenary. The 2 Elven War Dancers are here for better mulligans. There aren't a lot of dead cards in this deck. This gives us thinning, it gives us card carryover that is unstoppable. Just a fantastic card, should be in every Scoia'tael deck. outside of Scoia'tael as far as I'm concerned. And then let's get to the Sappers and the ambush kit. So the original version of the deck only played Morin as a ambush card, so Ensign only had one target. This made some mulligans very awkward. Let's say you mulligan one Elven War Dancer in the first round before the first round, but you draw Morin in the second round. So do you mulligan Morin and maybe get an Elven War Dancer in hand? What if you have Morin and Ensign? You have to mulligan Morin, but then what if you get one of these cards that is otherwise dead? Morin is just a card that helps keep Ensign from dying, which I found very helpful. So we add the Sappers so that Ensign gets a second target. The other thing Sappers does is, against bad players, it's actually a pretty bad card because it's just a vanilla 9-point bronze. But against good players, it's a maybe Morin. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that Morin, which destroys any enemy 5 or under in points, if your opponent thinks you have Morin, they will not play very strong but susceptible cards to her effect, such as Dorgare or any mage. So if you play Sappers, you get the effect of Morin, which is you limit the amount of cards that your opponent can play safely, but without the cost of a silver card. So you can play Sappers, your opponent will avoid playing maybe half their deck, or maybe just a few cards, when otherwise it would be optimal. Then you can play Morin right after that, and force them 2 turns in a row to play maybe a suboptimal play. Okay, next up is Denis Cranmer. This is our last combo of the deck. Denis Cranmer combos with Milva. You can play Denis Cranmer for turn 1, and then play Milva to return it back to your hand, and get the effect of Denis Cranmer twice. Milva can also be used to return an opponent's spy to your hand, but be wary that it boosts it by 3. But it does give you another spy card. Milva is also very good against Bran, because if you're going turn 1, you play Denis Cranmer, your opponent plays their Bran combo, and you play Milva, not only do you get to play Denis Cranmer twice, but you also return your opponent's Morkvarg to their hand, their 5-point Morkvarg. So now they have to make a 5-point play of a card that they already had. It's just a huge tempo swing. Then our last bronze cards, the Spy, it's obviously great with the Pyrotechnicians and these other damage cards. Barclay Elves, because all of our dwarf cards have the same effect, damage, and the agitators draw either of these cards, and these cards are both good on their own. It's just a better agitator, really. That's a good way to think about it, actually. So it's an agitator that can maybe draw an agitator. And Yarpin's Zigaran is our carryover card, another card that helps us against Bran, which makes this a really good anti-Bran deck. And then the final card that makes this an absolute Bran killer is Aglius. Aglius drawing Restore from our opponent's graveyard is one of the biggest plays in the game. So think about it this way. Imagine early in the game we played our Denis Cranmer Milva combo twice. So Denis Cranmer boosts all dwarves by 2. We play Aglius, a 9-point play, Restore, Barclay Elves. Barclay Elves becomes 10 points, that's 19. Barclay Elves then pulls a Dwarven Agitator, which is 4 points because of our double Denis Cranmer. That's a 23-point play so far. Dwarven Agitator pulls Mahakam Pyrotechnician. It draws a base copy, so it's only 5 more points. So we have 9, 10 for 19, 4 for 23, plus 5. That's 28-point gold so far. And then we do up to 9 points of damage. So that's a 37 potential point play from one card. And against Bran, you'll often be able to hit at least 2, often 3 rows. And that's just a devastating way to get back at a Bran that revels in having a short 3rd round. So save Egg for your 3rd round. All right, and then that's it for the deck introductions.